I want to talk about improv with you. I love the way you improvise. You have a very natural sound, a very lyrical sound, and a very accessible sound. But at the same time, you can do all this other cool stuff. So we have a lot of students who want to improvise jazz piano. And do you have any exercises that you find to be very helpful for students, or exercises that you might have done when you were learning jazz to become a better improviser?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few that we could talk about.
Yeah.
There's one that I have that I call the rock climber exercise.
Rock climber.
But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about more of a technical exercise that will help you play the changes and hear the changes. I mean, the rock climber exercise is good for that too.
Sure.
But a great one you can do is just play arpeggios over all the changes of a tune.
Oh, okay.
So for example, we played Billie's Bounce at the beginning of the interview, right? So just play eighth notes and play the changes, just play arpeggios with those changes. So if a chord lasts for one measure, then you got to fill up the whole measure. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then back down. It's like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And
you're playing the chord extension on the top.
Right,
okay.
Right. Because that 9 sound, that extension is a really important part of the way that jazz sounds. It helps give you a lot of extra color. So do that over the entire form. The B flat 7, then F7, B flat 7, F7, and then D7, G minor, C7, F, D, G, C.
Wow, it really makes you think about it.
Yeah, you got to really know what those chord tones are.
Yeah.
And that has the benefit of teaching you what those are, what the actual notes are, and teach your fingers which notes to play over these chords. And you're working on your time and your swing feel and the form all at the same time.
Yeah, and helping you solo, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because so much of soloing is not just playing scales, but outlining these seventh positions.
Exactly.
And so just starting to see those shapes, that's really valuable. I love that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, that's
before.
a really beneficial exercise.
What do you call that?
That one I just call arpeggios. I don't have
Just arpeggios?
I don't have a cool name.
You got to
for
give that
one
one a name.
Yeah,
That's a good
one. I remember when I was at North Texas, they would always bring in like really famous like A-list jazz musicians to come in and do lectures and play for us. And one time they had Mike Stern come in. Who's a really well-known like fusion jazz guitar player.
Yeah.
And somebody asked him, he played a little bit and just blew us all away with his playing. And then he opened up the floor for questions. And the first question somebody asked him was, "Hey Mike, how do you learn tunes?" And he didn't say anything and just started doing that. Just arpeggios.
Really? You're kidding?
Yeah.
Wow. So he goes through the chords first.
Yeah.
To make sure. Yeah, that's such an important thing to be able to do. And yeah, chords relate to scales, scales relate to chords. It's all connected. I mean, everything you just played, it's like F mixolydian.
Exactly.
So that's fantastic. Okay, so I'm really excited with the rock climber.
Yeah, so the rock climber is a great exercise. It's a little bit more simple, but it's a little bit more of a melodic way to do this. So if we're going to do this over Billie's bounce, the rock climber exercise has 4 parts. You're going to go 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 7. And these are the scale degrees of each chord.
1, 2, 3, 5.
Yeah. So
3, 4, 5, 7.
So for F7, 1, 2, 3, 5 is F, G, A, C.
Okay.
Then 3, 4, 5, 7 is A, B flat, C, E flat.
Okay, so the scale we're using on an F7 chord, this would be the
mixolydian
scale, which is like an F major, but has the lowered 7.
Has that flat 7, right?
Okay, so we're thinking of each of these as scale degrees. 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 7. Okay?
Right. So we're going to do those ascending and descending. So the exercise is you go through one chorus just doing 1, 2, 3, 5. Then F7, here comes B flat 7. Then F7, D7, G minor, C7, then F7, D7, G7, C7.
Ooh, wow. Really?
So you can simplify that too. You don't have to play that whole 1, 6, 2, 5 turnaround at the end. You can just make it a 5 chord at the end.
I see. Okay.
So then do it again, but you use 3, 4, 5, 7s. This one's a little bit trickier because you have to think about what the third is of each chord. That's your starting place.
Right.
So if our chord is F7, I know the third is A.
Right.
So we're going to start with A, 3, 4, 5, 7 of F7. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. F7, and B flat 7, F7 again, B flat 7, F7, D7, G minor, C7, F7, D, G, C.
Ooh, we gotta really think there. And you went to D.
Yeah.
Right. Now, does it matter if you go up or down, or just whatever's closest?
We're gonna get there. So it doesn't matter which octave you use.
Okay.
I would go with whatever's closest because what this is going to do is it's going to start to train you to start to put together some eighth note lines. And when you're putting together eighth note lines, you don't want to be jumping around too much. It makes it feel kind of jarring, and it's not the most melodic way to approach improvising. I mean, you can certainly be melodic that way, but it's going to have a really angular, intervallic kind of sound.
So you want to connect to the two of them.
Yeah, that's better while you're learning. And then once you're comfortable being melodic with a lot of stepwise motion and using voice leading, then when you start to break out into doing more intervallic stuff, it's still going to sound good because you'll understand how to be melodic with it.
Right. Okay.
So now the next step with the rock climber is we do the same thing but descending. So now we go 5, 3, 2, 1, and then 7, 5, 4, 3. So.
Yeah.
And B flat 7.
It's already starting to sound kind of cool. It sounds like a nice little solo there.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like you're playing jazz a little bit.
So let's say the student learns this, they're doing good. What's the next thing? Maybe more intermediate level kind of improv stuff? Like where would you go from here?
So from here, once you're comfortable doing the rock climber and playing along your arpeggios over these changes, what you can start to do is look for shapes within chords. So different triads or different sequences of notes that you can use amongst all the chords.
Okay.
So one of my favorites is to find triads that fit within a dominant 7 chord.
Okay.
So for example, if our chord is F7, right, let's include the 9 because that's a nice color. From our arpeggio exercise, we're using the 9 anyway. So if I'm looking at these notes, F, A, C, E flat, and G, I'm already seeing a few different triads within this chord.
Right.
So the one that I like to use the most is C, E flat, and G, which by itself is a C minor triad. So you can think of that as a minor triad starting on the 5th of the chord.
Yeah.
And you can improvise using that. And then as you move to B flat 7, use the same idea because they're the same type of chord, same chord quality. They're both dominant chords. So this minor triad based on the 5th is going to work for both chords. So you can improvise a little bit like, or I'm using F minor there over B flat 7.
Oh, that's cool.
And then back to C minor here.
Interesting. So just to break it down, we're on a dominant 7 chord, and you're saying I can use the C, E flat, G.
That's right.
That's the 9th, and it's a C minor. So I can just do, right?
Yeah.
Just play C minor down the piano. What if I want to add some notes to that?
Then you can use another triad that's built into the chord as well.
Okay.
So what I'm doing there, out of those 5 notes, I'm using the top 3, which is also known as an upper structure.
Right.
So what if we use the middle 3 notes, A, C, and E flat? You only have to change one note.
More of a diminished kind of sound.
Right, kind of a diminished sounding. So you can combine those triads like that.
Oh, super cool. Right? That's kind of the sound.
Exactly.
It's kind of like an A minor 7 flat 5 type of sound.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. It's so cool how all the chords connect. So when you're soloing, you're thinking of triads.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
Now, when you solo, are you thinking of 2 triads or 3 or 4 or?
It depends on the chord. It depends on what I want to play, how simple or complex I want to play. I mean, there's a ton of different shapes that work over dominant chords, especially. There's less that work over major and minor chords because the relationship between the 3rd and the 7th for those chords is a perfect 5th, which is a very strong, grounded sounding interval.
Right.
That's a very solid grounding sound. So the reason that I'm using the 3rd and 7th for this is because the 3rd and the 7th of every chord is what determines the chord quality. Makes a chord major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, or those are the 3 main ones.
Right.
So with the dominant 7th chord, the 3rd and 7th is a tritone apart.
Right.
So for F7, the 3rd is A, the 7th is E flat.
Right.
So that's a very unstable sounding interval. It's not as solid as a 5th. So because of that, it's unstable sounding interval, that lends itself to a lot more possibilities.
Right.
You can play, if I just play the 3rd and 7th, for example, and we play our 2 shapes, our C minor, that sounds really good. Or if we play that diminished one, that A, C, and E flat, that sounds really good too.
Yeah.
But you can also play like a G major triad if you wanted to throw in a sharp 11, make it kind of an altered sound. That's a cool sound. Or you can make it like a flat 9 chord, use a D major triad.
That's a cool sound.
Or you can play an A flat major triad if you want to make it a sharp 9 chord. Yeah.
It's
And then mix and match
two.
them. Then mix and match them.
Yeah, that's super cool. I remember when I discovered like upper structures. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, you can just play these like major triads above a dominant chord, and it's just such a hip sound.
That's something that Oscar Peterson does a lot. He uses that minor triad on the 5th. He does it like.
Oh, super cool.
Oscar Peterson likes to use that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I can't play as fast as he can.
Well,
but
nobody can.
really.
Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this interview, I encourage you to check out the full-length interview at pianowithjonny.com, where we talk about a ton of other valuable tools, tips, and tricks on jazz piano playing. So I'll put a link to that below, and I'll see you in the next one.